Hello, hello. Greetings, everybody. It's GriffinGamingRPG. Thank you for joining me today. Today is Tuesday, August 8th. I don't remember what day it is. Starting a little late today, and my intention, as I said last week, was to start kicking off my shows right around midday, 12 noon. But unfortunately, today I got up and I was having some technical issues. My lighting, one of my lights in my lighting rig decided that it didn't want to work anymore. And so I had to figure out another alternative way for you to see me today. So it took a few minutes. So my apologies for starting a little bit late, but yes, I am here. And as I said, I do want to be here more frequently on Tuesdays and Thursdays midday. I'm going to boost this light up just a little more. Let's see if this helps me a bit. I don't know if light helps or not, but oh boy, pardon me. I have not been talking today, so my voice isn't that great either. But anyway, thank you guys for joining me. I mentioned last week that I wanted to begin a series going back and looking at Chris Roberts's series 10 for the Chairman. I kind of felt this was a good time to do it. It's a quiet time leading up to CitizenCon, and I felt like the more I've been talking to people in the community, the more I'm finding out that there's so much information about Star Citizen that people just aren't aware of. And a lot of it is because there's just been literally just thousands of hours, websites, just tons of information about Star Citizen. And to go through all of it is no small task. Even if you decided right now to say, I'm going to go back and watch every video that was ever done about Star Citizen, you'd probably end up being very frustrated in the end. So I said what I would do is that I would go back and review some of the things that highlight Chris Roberts' vision about Star Citizen. Give me 1 second here, gang. I'm trying to put out a tweet, which I should have done earlier. Another tweet, or send out a message, I should say. Me and my goofy self. I waited way too long to do this, and I should have did it a long time ago. Anyway, so that's what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be looking at Chris Roberts's earlier presentations that he did on the Series 10 for the Chairman. I'm going to start from the very beginning, or at least as far back as I could go. Episodes 1 and 2 don't seem to be available for some reason, and I remember that they were for a while. But anyway, to make a long story short, I don't know, what happened with that. So I'm going to start with episode 3. Let's see. Let me send this out one more time here. I'm not sure what Fast Card is trying to tell me because I have no idea what he's talking about right now. So FC, if you're watching me, you're not being very clear about what it is you're talking about. Let's see. Wrong place. Bear with me here 1 second, gang. Trying to get myself together. There we go. Boom and boom. Okay, good. All right. So anyway, that's what I'm going to jump into. Is to do a little bit of this 10 for the Chairman piece, and I might stop from time to time as we go through it, because this is supposed to be my review of it and commentary. And if there's something I think that's worth talking about, fine. If you see something that's worth talking about, please put it in the chat, and definitely we'll stop and talk about it. Hopefully I'll be paying attention to both my screen and also the Twitch stream as well. So let's go ahead and get started. This video is approximately 12 minutes. Not very long. I might do a second one after that, or a third one, depending, but I'll probably do this for about an hour just to give you a heads up. So if you want to get something to drink, something to munch on, perfect time to do it for this opening. So let's go ahead and get that started. All right. Let me change screens to something more quieter. And here we go.
Hey everyone, welcome back for another episode of 10 for the Chairman. For those of you that haven't watched this before, this is where I answer 10 questions from our very generous subscribers that they've asked over the last several weeks or months. and you're getting it from the horse's mouth, so to speak. So here, let's hit the first of the 10 questions. Isaac Clark asks, will the dogfighting module also serve as a good benchmarking tool for our current PC hardware? I'd like it if it were a reasonable way to determine whether some upgrades will be necessary before the game goes live. Yes, I think it will be a great benchmarking tool. So you have to remember that the game today is going to be a lot less optimized than the final game will be, because right now we focus on sort of core functionality and features and not so much on the optimization, although we are doing some R&D into some things that will, we think will give us a big performance gain. Merge instancing on a bunch of our meshes, and then also we're going to be supporting Mantle, which will really help with the draw call count and efficiency that you get in DirectX.
Let me stop there for a second. Something Chris says here, he talks about optimization, which is something that a lot of folks in the early days really didn't pay attention to, I think. Hey, Alex, how are you, man? A lot of people in the beginning did not pay attention to this whole thing about optimization and performance and how they tie together. And as you guys know, when a game is finalized, there's a point of what they call optimization. In music recording, they call it mastering. It's like where you kind of make everything balanced and sound good, and the performance sounds well across the board. And in software development, the optimization is when the game is basically brought to a point where it will run at its peak efficiency. The code is minimized as much as possible, compressed, all that good stuff. Well, while the game's in development, they don't do that because it takes a lot of work to do that. And basically, when a new patch comes out, it all gets undone again. They'd have to do the optimization all over again, which takes up more time. So in the early days, we would get like really, really, depending on your rig, you get some really funky frame rates. I remember at one point playing Star Citizen, and it was running at 8 to 10 frames on an average. That was it, 8 to 10 frames. We used to joke around back then and call it basically a slideshow, right? It literally ran at that rate all the time. And so even if we had a good rig, if you were getting up to 20 frames, that was with a real strong rig back then. So, in the early days, and the game still isn't completely it's not optimized. I'm not going to say completely, it's not optimized. So, once optimization comes in, things run better. But back in the day, it was horrible.
So I would basically say if you can run the hangar really well with some big ships and all the rest of the stuff, or the dogfighting module really well, then you probably will be able to run the final game pretty well. I definitely would like to see Star Citizen be, one of those games that gets benchmarked in all those sort of PC GPU tests, and that is kind of one of our goals. So I think some people are already doing it. So there you go. Okay, next question. Baron Bruiser asks, in the dogfighting module, will we be able to have our friends join us in our bigger ships? It would be great to test out crew cohesion. So yes, I totally agree. We're definitely going to let, when we have big ships in the dogfighting alpha, your friends will join, and that'll do the whole part of the cooperative stuff. At the very beginning, the very first release of the dogfighting module, it won't have the very biggest ships, mainly because most of them haven't been built yet. I'm trying to think. The Constellation is the biggest one right now. And the ships themselves in the dogfighting, and there's a lot more assets that have to be built besides what you've seen in the hangar. So there's a vast amount of damage modeling and states, equipment that goes on the ships, shield meshes. So there's a huge amount of assets that are built. So what's going to be constraining us in the dogfighting module is like how fast we can get the assets done. So the plan is at the beginning that you start in the sort of single-seated dogfighting stuff, the Hornet, maybe a couple of the other ones like the 300i and the Aurora. And then as the assets come online, as we finish off all the damage pieces, all the rest of the stuff, then we'd fold them in. But so I wouldn't expect the bigger ships to be in the dogfighting module. It won't be in the first release and may not even be the second, but probably sometime around mid next year, we'll be having battles where you'd have a bunch of people on a Constellation or an Idris against a bunch of people flying other kinds of ships. And yeah, definitely, that's a big draw. It's actually that's the thing for me that I'm most excited about doing, is playing this game where I can run around and man a turret inside a gun while I'm coming, while someone else is doing a strafing pass in their fighter. So I'm working on that. That will be in as soon as humanly possible. Let me put it that way.
Okay. So there's two things there. Hey, Nuso, there's two things here that Chris says, right? The question was, once we get into or what was Arena Commander, right? Being able to go into, Arena, what we have now is Arena Commander. Will we be able to do multi-crew battles? in Arena Commander, because that'll be a way for people to test out crew cohesion, how they work together. And Chris says, yeah, eventually we'll get there. We're not there now. We don't have any of the big multi-crew ships. In fact, the only multi-crew ship they had at the time was the Constellation. And so he says, eventually that'll happen. Well, if you look at the upper corner on my screen here, this was recorded in December of 2013. And it is now August of 2023. Is that until 10 years later that we are going to finally get multi-crewing in the ship? Yeah, I tested Arena Commander on a mid-level CPU, 16 RAM integrated graphics, SSD, ran fairly well and surprisingly. Okay, that's not too bad. No, Alex, I'm just on Twitch right now. I haven't gotten that fancy yet with my own stream yet. So I'm just doing it on here for now. But I do put them on my YouTube afterwards. So that's about as close as I'm getting to it right now. What was I going to say? So anyway, 10 years later, it is not till now, this next patch, that we're finally going to be able to do multi-crew. What's also interesting is that Chris's ambitious eye back then was maybe sometime next year we'll be able to do it. Well, now you can see why they told Chris Roberts to stop giving out dates. And mind you, I will say this. This is during the period in December of 2013 where the what was it called? The milestones, the stretch goals were still just getting wrapped up. And so the game was expanding in what the community was asking for from it. That went through 2013 to 2014. And so Chris's idea of just dealing with Arena Commander, believe me, this thing blew up much bigger. There was more stuff that the community said they wanted us to do. And he even mentions even the Idris being in Arena Commander. Ain't happened yet. Okay. We do know they are about to expand it. We do know about that multi-crew is about to happen. To what, how large of a ships they're going to give us an Arena Commander to do crewing. It's going to be an interesting story once we get that in 320. But again, I want to point it out. This was 10 years ago, and we're just now seeing that particular aspect of the game finally arriving to us. So let's keep it going here. Let's see what he's got to say.
Okay, on to the next question. Enaziel asks, when eventually, if you have not already planned to do, you guys implement your own server code and backbone, as it were, will we be seeing a chat channel early on between dogfighting module and the hangar? One of the reasons why I made the decision to push back on the dogfighting module is that I really wanted to have the dogfighting module be fully integrated with the back end that would also ultimately fully integrate with the hangar and allow for things like chat and all the rest of them. I just feel like that's a much better test of the ultimate game situation we need all this code in. And we've actually been working pretty hard on that, and we've actually made some really great progress. So we're a little ahead of where we thought we would be, which is really good news. And I kind of want it plugged in because it's the glue, the persistence, the glue that goes between the dogfighting module and the hangar module and the future things like planet side and the boarding modules, and that also moves in with like chat and like we talked about the organizations, like how those are getting set up, and the chat channels you even have on their website play across into chat channels and stuff that you would have in the game. So we'll definitely have the chat channel between dogfighting and the hangar. That's why I made the delay, is so you can be, the idea is you'll start in the hangar and then you'll equip your ship, and you could even chat maybe with friends and organization in the hangar, say, hey, let's get into a battle, and you can jump in, equip your ship, jump into the ship, fire up the hangar, go to the matchmaking screen, which is basically sort of like a HUD element that you'd be seeing in your ship going into simulation mode, and you would have chat available to your friends list and all the rest and go in there. And that was one of the major reasons why I just felt like it was better to do it right, take the time, have the proper system in there, rather than sort of put a kind of midway solution in, which would have been using the existing CryEngine backend tech, which we would then have to throw away. Okay, so I hope that answers that question.
Okay, so let me stop on that one. Never happened. This was back in the time when we didn't have the persistent universe. All we had were what he calls modules, right? We had a hangar module, which is where you basically spawn into the game. You went to this console, you called up your ship. Was it a console? No. I can't remember how we did it. I don't know if it was on a Moby Glass or a console. No, it was a console, I think. Anyway, or maybe it was that hologram thing. I don't know if anybody remembers. It's God, it was so long ago. But you would call up your ship in the hangar, and you were in the hangar though when you did it. You'd call up your ship, and then you could go into your ship. Nothing worked on the ship other than the door. That was it. Nothing worked on the ship. And you would go in there and you'd sit in your ship and you would feel so good that you were sitting inside of this virtual ship. Called it up from the marker on the floor. That's right. Thank you, Fast Cart. I forgot. There were these. God, I completely forgot about that. Oh my God. Talk about going back to ancient history. Okay. Wow. Okay. If you weren't around back, trust me, be glad you missed this. Oh my God. There were these little light up marker, these little markers that were on the hangar floor. And you would walk up to this marker and you would put your mouse over it. And depending on the size of your ship, that would be the type of ship that you could wake up, make spawn. It would just spawn, right? So you see this thing, you click on it, and then you'd move out the way. And when you would move out of the way, by the time you turned around, your ship would be there. Yeah, it was like magic, right? It was really weird. It's like if you had a Connie, let's say there were 3 marks, and if you had a Connie, you wouldn't be able to spawn it at the mark at the back of the hangar or the mark at the front of the hangar, but you could probably spawn it at the mark in the middle of the hangar because the ship was so long, it had to be able to fit. So because you put it at the front marker, then it might be up toward the hangar door. It was weird. If you had fighters, you could pretty much spawn those anywhere on any of those markers, right? And I remember this was in for a long time. I think this was in until we had the Starfarer. I think the Starfarer was like the biggest ship that we had at the time. But man, oh man, that was crazy times back then. So anyway, I didn't mean to get all sidetracked. But anyway, Chris, when these modules came up, Chris was saying, oh, you should be able to talk to people who are in the hangar module, should be able to talk to people who are in the arena commander module, and talk to the people who are in the social module. Well, that never happened. That never did happen. But they did create it where there was chat in the social module. That one, obviously, is called the social module, right? You're supposed to be able to talk to people. Arena commander, I don't remember there being a chat feature, and I could be wrong. Back in the day, you were probably in Discord talking to somebody or whatever type of communication software you were using, but that never did happen. Just so you'll know. Here we go. Let's keep it going.
Torvik asks, in the dogfighting module, how big will the space be where we will dogfight? And will there be empty space only, or will there be some nice backgrounds like planets, asteroids, and nebula? Okay, so the dogfighting map, the base one that we've built is 20 kilometers cubed. So it's a fairly decent space to dogfight around in. And then if you go beyond the boundaries, it'll be sort of like Battlefield. And it will be full of some cool stuff. So we're going to put an asteroid belt in there, a nebula, some background planets, some nice background art. So yeah, it'll be kind of a fun level to dogfight in.
Okay. Chris said that it was 20 kilometers in size, 20 by 20. That was the big space that you fought in. It was a pretty narrow space, to be honest with you. If by the time you got your ship opened up at full speed, you only had a few seconds where you had to pull it back down. And he also said that it would be kind of like Battlefield, where like if you got near the perimeter, it would give you a warning. That wasn't the way it happened. You would start heading toward the edge of this thing. You couldn't see it, right? Because it was all you saw was like a skybox of space. And as you got close to the edge, it would start to illuminate into a grid to let you know that you were approaching the end. That was it. And if you hit that grid, you blew up. There was no, oh, you've passed the marker, return in 15 seconds or 30 seconds. Nah. If you were going too fast, and even if you tried to slow down, if your thrusters if you couldn't reverse fast enough and decouple and boom, you blew up in there. So that was the way that worked, okay?
All right, next question. Crypt Keeper asks, is a dogfighting module going to include more settings to tweak so even some of us who are saving money to upgrade our systems can play at a playable 30-ish frames per second? So I'm not so sure the initial release of the dogfighting will have a lot more sort of performance tweaks or settings than, say, some of the hangar stuff has. We'll probably have a simple level of LODs in for the Hornet and a couple of the other ships that will launch with the dogfighting. and you can always reduce your resolution. But obviously, as I said a little earlier on in the questions, that the optimization stage tends to happen towards the back end of the project. And so the very beginning of the dogfight, it's probably not going to be that optimized. And as time goes on, it will get better. And you could probably drop the resolution down or the quality level down. I mean, I think CryEngine actually runs quite well if you don't run it in ultra settings on some ridiculous resolution. So hopefully that will work for you.
Yep. Yeah, Alex, the Tholian web. I remember that. Yeah, it was like the Tholian web grid that came up. One thing I will say, if I'm remembering correctly, this person's asking about the dogfighting module running at 30 frames a second. I don't remember how fast it ran, but I will say it ran decently. I don't remember. Now, maybe some other people will remember differently than I did, but I don't remember like having real frame rate issues in there. And that's obviously because we're in space, right? There's not a lot there. If even in the game now, if you're down on Orison or R-Corp or whatever, New Babbage, you may be getting frames at like, I'm just picking a random number, 30, 35 frames. But then you get up into space and you're getting freaking like 70, 100 frames, something like that. It was easier. So I do remember that the performance in the dogfighting module was not that bad. You didn't get the slideshow herky jerky thing. It was pretty decent. I do remember that. Also, some of you may not know this too, that in the beginning there was it was implied. It was implied in the beginning that if you went into Star Citizen, you were going to have a pretty hefty gaming rig. It wasn't until much later that started to disappear, and CIG kind of made it where, having a decent rig, you would be able to run the game well. But in the beginning, everybody was expecting that they were going to have, after looking at the graphics and everything, it was just automatic. You're going to have to drop some money and build a real gaming rig to play this particular game. And a lot of it because Chris also was into making, these really, they have a couple episodes where he would show his rig. He'd build out these new rigs and stuff that were like top of the line type of things. And so players in the beginning, a lot of people went out and spent decent money so they could play the game. Other folks kind of suffered through it. But I think I remember correctly that the hangar module and the dogfighting module, their performance wasn't too bad.
All right, on to the next question. Shadow Knight asks, will there be a flight tutorial, very basic, with the dogfighting module? That's a good question. A lot of people around here really hate the tutorials. I know I was just playing around with the Elite Dangerous Alpha and it had a tutorial and I was kind of feeling, no, I just want to be shooting other ships that shoot back at me. So I don't know. So if we do a tutorial, I would guess that maybe we would do a tutorial with like an AI ship or something that you could fight against, but we haven't specifically designed that yet. So that's sort of still to be determined. Okay, on to the next question.
Okay, that never happened for sure. When you went into the dogfighting module, there was nothing really to help you out with learning how to figure out the ship. You really did figure it out on your own, which really didn't bother me. The ships back then were much easier. There were only so many controls. You didn't have all the different systems and all this other stuff that you had to worry about. You spent a couple of minutes in there, you figured it out. I think you spent more time trying to figure out how to fight the combatants more than you did trying to fly your ship, because you were in open space. There wasn't any big obstructions out there that you had to worry about running into. I mean, you could run into stuff, don't get me wrong, but there was enough room out there that you could kind of figure it out.
Quiggin Scotch asks, will we see greater access to weapons in preparation for the dogfight module? Will we have access to different missiles, more guns, power plants, and engines? Will I finally get the cargo box for my Aurora? So definitely, as the dogfighting module rolls out, and then along the way, we are going to be increasing the amount of weapons and munitions, etc., available to you, and items, like shields and all the rest of the stuff, thrusters, because that's the whole point, is to test out all these items, to do balance and all the rest of the stuff. And we'll probably allow, we'll probably give some sort of test money so people can buy some and try them for like a day or two, and then after we've tested it, then we would take it back. So yes, the answer there is there will be a greater access, and we'll be basically, as the assets are getting built, we'll be bringing them online. And then will I finally get the cargo box for my Aurora? I think if your Aurora is meant to have a cargo box, it should already have it in the hangar. If not, then maybe that's a bug, so I'll have to check on that. I guess it would depend on what kind of Aurora you have and what the base stats say you've got. But it should actually be already on in the hangar. Okay, on to the...
Okay. Boy, there was a lot there in that particular question, and I've kind of forgotten the first part because I got hung up on the Aurora part. The weapons. Okay, so some of you guys know that. Oh God, I've forgotten what it's called now. What's the stuff we get? Fast card. What's it called? The credits we get. Um, I'm having a brain fart here. What are those credits we get every month? No, not UEC. Rec. Thank you. Rec. Thank you. Okay, so you used to use Rec to rent stuff, and you still do. But the idea was that you could rent stuff in the game. And in Arena Commander, you would get these points, and then you could use the points to buy more weapons, and you could trick out your ships because your ships came with a base load, right? Base loadout. And then we used to have this little thing in the hangar that you could kind of adjust your weapons loadout. Anyway, that's what that was all about. Okay, whether you could swap out weapons and all of this stuff, and that was always something that Chris wanted to be able to do. We should be able to swap out weapons. I was kind of laughing about the cargo box thing because some of you remember on the old Aurora commercial, they showed the Aurora CL, and one of the things they showed was being able to load this cargo box. Well, they don't show you doing it, but they showed this cargo box attached to the bottom of the Aurora and come off. And yeah, okay. I don't even know why that would even come up in the Arena Commander thing or the dog fighting about the cargo box, but it was one of the things that you were supposed to be able to do. I've not flown an Aurora CL in forever, so I don't even know if that's in there now, if you can actually put a box on there or load stuff. I have no idea. So maybe somebody in chat knows whether or not you could do that. Yeah, you also got rec. Absolutely, Alex. Yeah, I still get my rec. I can't, it's like some millions of rec that I have in my thing. But yeah, you could, if you were a subscriber, you got rec too. And that was also a benefit of a subscriber, so that you could go into the Arena Commander and you could rent stuff and do all types of stuff with that. So let me go back.
Is you sort of assign points to ships. So obviously an Aurora would be something like 1 point, but a Constellation could be something like 5 points.
Far? I think I did.
Don't quote me on these. It may be a closer. Hornets, Freelancers, etc. I can't see a round of dogfighting with 8 constellations.
Okay, let me go back to the beginning. Sorry.
On the number of, will the dogfighting module, how will you balance ships by class size? Will there be limits on the number of Hornets, Freelancers, etc.? I can't see a round of dogfighting with 8 constellations against 8 Hornets being fair. Well, let's see. I think I'd be interested to see 8 constellations against 8 Hornets, because I'm not so sure it'll be quite as one-sided as you think, because they both have different pros and cons. So depending on how you're fighting and what you're doing, it may be
8 Hornets against 8 Connies, y'all. Who would win? Drop it in chat.
A closer fight than you think. But yeah, we're going to have various categories in the matchmaking. So we've been playing with various sort of matchmaking setups. One of them is you sort of assign points to ships. So obviously an Aurora would be something like 1 point, but a Constellation could be something like 5 points. And don't quote me on these points because this is just for illustrations purposes. And each team gets to have 30 points or something like that. So you can sort of make the trade-off between lots of little ships or a fewer smaller, bigger ships. And then we'll also probably have matchmaking that like, okay, this is just for Hornet v Hornet or Aurora v Aurora. So we'll have various options that you'll be able to choose from the matchmaking system inside the dogfighting module.
Okay, so to answer your question, New Soul, you couldn't man ships back then. Yeah, see the fast car. Yeah, back then you only had a pilot in the Connie. That was it. So yeah, I'm thinking the Hornets might have taken them out, to be honest with you. The MR, you can set cargo box on the rails between the landing gear. So okay, that on the MR, because that's how the CL was set up, Alex. That there's the cargo boxes went underneath. So if that works, then that means they did finally implement. Well, it wasn't implemented back in the Arena Commander time, but they did finally implement that. So that's good to know. Everyone is beating you to the punch. Yeah, everybody's beating you to the punch, Fast Cart. Yeah, there was supposed to be a scoring system that they were going to put in, and I'm not even sure if that even happened. Player v player, and I don't know. It's kind of interesting. I don't know how many people did player versus player. I never did, and it's not because I didn't want to. I always went up against the bad guys. I went up against the Van Duel ships, and maybe that's because there was always incentive to do that. But that's interesting that they say that. Maybe folks did do that. Let's see. I don't know.
Okay, on to the next question. Phelan asks, I was wondering whether the dogfighting module will be released with a finalized flight model. Are the physics and flight system more or less complete, or will they be tuned as part of the alpha process? If it is going to be tuned, what sort of feedback will be useful to the team? So the flight model is not going to be finalized. I mean, first of all, we're going to have a few different kinds of flight models, and the whole point of the dogfighting alpha is to get it out there so everyone plays it and gives us good feedback. Is it fun? Does it feel good? Is it does it feel cool, or does it feel realistic, or whatever the feedback would be? So that's a big part of it, and obviously the stuff that we sort of say, yeah, that's a good point, we would definitely work. So we kind of want to get it out there to sort of get a good idea of what people feel. So we will definitely tune it. The feedback will probably be along the lines of kind of some of the feedback that you would expect on a subjective basis, because this isn't really a bug issue. It's more like, I like this, or I don't like this. I think this ship's too tough. I think this weapon's too weak, etc. And that would probably be in some kind of forum setup that we would have, though we haven't sort of built and designed that lab. Okay.
Pretty straightforward stuff there. I don't know. Thank you, Fast Cart. You said people did at that point. People did go in there and do it, but it was too easy. And I think I do remember that people were a little discouraged about it. But I don't know if that was because it was too easy, because it was the way the players were playing, or what. I'm not sure. I want to talk about this thing about the flight model, because the flight model has changed several times. There are a lot of people who believe that the earlier flight model, which would have been like 2 flight models back, if I'm not mistaken, was probably the best version of it that they had. Everybody seemed to like that, and CIG tweaked it. This is when they did the change to the flight model, and I think this is when they either sped up ships or slowed down ships. I can't remember. But people weren't too crazy about it. Then the hover mode thing came out. People weren't too crazy about that. And then they got rid of hover mode, and they went to this later model, which people liked a little bit better, because it was better than what the hover mode version was. Now, supposedly, they're going to give us this new flight model, which brings in master modes, and supposedly it's supposed to be closer to what they wanted, and we'll have to see how the community responds to that flight model.
Or she asks, since dogfighting is a testing module, what will you have built in the dogfighting module to retrieve data? Will you only have logging to file, which in case of problems we have to send to you? Can it be turned on or off? Have an automated system to gather statistics or other info that is directly sent to you with or without us knowing? You mean kind of like the NSA? Or have you thought of any other ways of monitoring the test? One of the big reasons why I decided I wanted to push back the dogfighting is I really wanted a proper test of the back end of the system, which means that we're running the servers. It's not sort of a peer-to-peer sort of multiplayer typical kind of setup that a lot of the first-person shooter stuff can have. And so the servers are our servers, basically. So we get to see what's happening in every battle, and so we can sort of track metrics of this ship beats that ship more than this weapon's stronger or too weak, or all the rest of stuff. So we'll have access to pretty much all the battle data, because essentially the servers are run by us. Everyone else is just running a client connecting to it and simulating local stuff that doesn't affect the actual master gameplay. But if you're playing against other people, we have to be server authoritative. I think that's kind of the how we would retrieve the data, and it's far less innocuous than some other people that have been retrieving data recently. Anyway, so there you go. That's the end of another episode of 10 for the Chairman. I hope you found the answers useful and informative, and we're wearing my Drake Interplanetary hoodie, keeping me warm here in the chilly December month in Santa Monica, which is actually a little colder now than it normally is. So thanks for listening, and catch you next week. Goodbye.
Okay, that's that episode of 10 for the Chairman. Yeah, Fast Cart, there's no joke ban here. Doesn't mean there's no coins. Trust me, there is a joke ban here. Trust me, there's one. Don't fool yourself.
This video is sponsored in part by my
Don't fool yourself, my friend. There is definitely a joke ban here. It's our good friend Space Tomato. We're going to go ahead and do the next episode, which is going to be episode 4. And we'll pick up from there. All right, here we go.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to yet another episode of 10 for the Chairman. For those of you that don't know about it, this is where I answer 10 questions submitted by our very generous subscribers that they have asked over the last few weeks, or maybe even as long as a month or two ago. So we're going to start with Vigilance's question.
So let me ask you this. Did you notice Chris is wearing the same clothes and nothing has changed, which means they must have did all of these one behind the other, right? They must have did like 2 or 3 of these at a time.
First out of the gate. I was wondering, when you call for an emergency landing on a carrier, will emergency nets come up to catch the ship to prevent it from causing more damage inside the carrier? If the ship crashes on the flight deck, will there be a bulldozer that will push it off deck and have emergency crew to put out the fire?
Okay, before he even answers that, did y'all see that question? Did y'all see that? Let me go back and start this question again, y'all, just in case you missed it, okay?
I was wondering, when you call for an emergency landing on a carrier, will emergency nets come up to catch the ship to prevent it from causing more damage inside the carrier? If the ship crashes on the flight deck, will there be a bulldozer that will push it off deck and have emergency crew to put out the fire?
Is this person seeing this in space? Okay, I'll leave it there.
So I think someone's been watching the Wing Commander movie, which is kind of cool. So I don't know about emergency nets. I mean, we actually haven't even thought about this side of it. It will probably be more something that we would have working in Squadron 42, because there'll definitely be cases where this sort of thing will be happening there. But I definitely think we'll probably have some level of emergency landings and rescue crew and all the rest of it. So I don't know whether they'll necessarily be nets, but we'll definitely have that whole sense of bringing in your damaged ship. Hopefully you can bring it down and people will come and beat out the flames of any burning parts on your ship. So, all right, on to the next question from Alpha.
Okay, y'all, is that practical? I mean, is it really that practical that somebody's going to come out with some fire extinguishers and put out your ship? I don't know. That was a bit much for me, but okay, whatever.
Alpha Strike. Will there be server wipes during Alpha Beta? I'm very much looking forward to helping flush out bugs during Alpha Beta, but wondering if any of our work will carry over to the persistent universe, or if there will be a clean wipe before release.
All right, this was back in 2013, y'all. Y'all see this question, okay? I'm sorry, 2014. This is January 2014 about wipes. This lets you know how long this subject has been going on.
That's a good question. We don't really have a specific stance on this at the moment. I mean, my guess is probably we would reset everybody when the game goes properly live. It's sort of hard to say, because I think when we go into like beta for the actual game that the backers will have, but maybe not necessarily for the full public yet, we probably wouldn't wipe that late stage stuff. But certainly some of the early stuff, like the dogfighting module, planetside module, all that, you'll definitely be able to earn some money for winning some fights and doing stuff, and that will be money that will allow you to buy some weapons, but it will be for just that sort of dogfighting test area. It won't be money that will carry through into the persistent universe. So I guess the answer is there's going to be a combination of this. So there will be wipes of some of the stuff, but not all of the stuff, and as you get closer to the final release, maybe some of the stuff you've done will carry over. Okay, on to the next question. Anthemer asks, what order are we looking at seeing the ship models in game? Cutlass was in the latest jump point, so what will be next? Avenger looked almost done in the video, so is that next? Retaliator is a huge favorite on the site, so maybe focus there. That's quite a lot of questions and suggestions there. So yeah, the Cutlass is actually going to be the next ship that everyone will actually see in the hangar. The ship that we've actually been working on the longest outside of that is the Idris Corvette, but it's a really huge ship, and we've been going through a little bit of a rearrange, redesign in the interior side to be able to fit the number of ships we want to fit on the hangar deck.
All right, Idris Corvette 2014, just so you'll know, 2014.
And I'm not quite sure of what the next one is. We're doing the variants on the Freelancer, and we're also going to be doing some stuff on the Caterpillar and stuff like that. So I guess it will be kind of a bit of a horse race between all those. We'll see what happens. Okay,
so I think the Idris finally showed up in 2015. I don't know if anybody remembers that, when they did a flyby of the Idris over Port Olisar. It was at a CitizenCon or a Gamescom. I forget which one, but it was unexpected. At the end of their demonstration, they got out and the pilot got out on the deck of Port Olisar. And then next thing you know, we heard this rumbling sound. They looked up and we saw the Idris fly over, and the place went absolutely nuts because it was huge, right? And then we didn't see it again for a long time until like maybe 2017 or 2018. But that was the first time we did see the Idris. So it was within like about a year or 2 years was the first time that we saw the Idris.
Okay, next question. Tsunami Jirai asks, can you tell us what exactly exploration entails and what plotting a jump point will be like.
Okay, Fast Cart, I know you're here. This whole conversation about what is exploration. We talked about this on Soul Voices 2 weeks ago. So let's see what Chris says here.
What exactly exploration entails? It's a lot. That's like how long is a piece of rope? So there's a lot to exploration. I mean, it's not just going to be looking for an undiscovered jump point and plotting the jump point and going to a new system on the other side. There's going to be just a lot of sort of mapping that will happen. So even in systems that are known, not all of the space is mapped. So basically there'll be certain areas like on the trade lanes and the general areas we'll pass that will have nav points on and will be mapped to a certain extent, but the vast amount of it won't be mapped. And so, maybe you find an asteroid field that isn't on a map. Maybe the asteroid field has some really good minerals, or maybe there's a wreck. So we're going to try and sort of add things to discover even in known space. So we're really sort of trying to up the amount of things that you can do if you're an explorer, where it's not just about jump points or finding a new system, although that's pretty cool. But obviously that's, we can't do everything all at once in the beginning, so that's all stuff and content we'll build to. And then the other thing I'll say is that we're, doing a lot of work and R&D on sort of procedural sort of content generation. So, I know a lot of people think, okay, all Star Citizen is completely scripted, but or designed or crafted. And yes, it has a huge amount, like Terra and Earth will definitely obviously be pretty much everything will be handcrafted. But to build a universe on the scale, we need to sort of balance some procedural stuff as well as crafted stuff, which is the way I think is actually the best way to build a big expansive universe. It's the same way that we're approaching the gameplay. We can't script every mission, so we're actually building it in such a way that the universe itself dynamically sort of runs itself, and the players' interactions sort of generate a lot of the missions and the intrigue and the action. So I didn't answer what will plotting a jump be like. Well, it should be a lot of fun and very scary and very risky. So, jump point's sort of a rip in the space-time continuum that takes you instantly almost instantly between two parts, many light years apart from each other. And so the concept with it is sort of to have, I don't know whether it's a space-time fabric sort of, big breaker, if you want to think in surfing terms, that you want to surf in, and you've got to hit exactly the right lines or else you're going to go off track and potentially get ripped apart or spat out in some random part of the universe. And obviously this will require a combination of some skill, some specific equipment, but once you've gone through and you've recorded your jump, so to speak, you can then turn around and sell that to the government, or sell that or share it with your friends. And obviously you can name a jump point or a system after you, which should be pretty cool. But it should be like trying to ride the hairiest big wave off the North Shore of Hawaii, but with like cool space effects. Anyway, all right, on to the next one. So
okay, let me stop there because this is one of the times where Chris does talk about this. Okay, well, two things. First off, he talks about exploration in a very vague way. I hate to say it, but he does say that exploration will be beyond just finding jump points and going through them and mapping stuff. He says it'll be way more. He says it's a lot, pretty wide is what he says. He gives some examples about how there will be random things that'll be scattered throughout systems and verses that you can stumble upon as a part of exploration as well. But we addressed this question a couple of weeks ago about what is exploration. It's very different to everybody about what it means. But I am glad that he says it's way more than just finding jump points and wormholes. Okay, even more than finding new orbital planets and things like that. We may find races. We may find items for crafting. I mean, exploration can go into the areas of science. We touched on that a little bit too last week. So exploration is pretty expansive, and they haven't nailed it down yet. Even though exploration is probably one of the most popular things that people want to do in Star Citizen, it's not definitively explained in such a way that you can articulate, oh, this is what you do for exploration. It's still too broad, and they still have to develop exactly what can be done in the game. So that's one thing. The other thing I'm glad he talked about here was the jump points. Because one thing he's talked about was, he said, and we saw this in the demonstration that was done for Pyro for the first time. We know we had it on the star map. The star map was like kind of the first thing to give us an idea of what it meant to go through a wormhole. When you went from system to system, you got the little whoosh and came through. But then when they demonstrated the Pyro transition, we saw them navigating the Carrack through the wormhole. Now, there are some things about going through wormholes that Chris talks about here that I think some people don't think about because maybe they thought about traveling through a wormhole based upon what they've seen in movies or other games. There's some important points here. Chris says you have to navigate through it, okay? He said there's a particular path that you have to take in order to get through it. And he says safely. He said it'll also be dangerous. Now, that could also mean danger to the ship. For example, if you move too far toward the edges, maybe something starts to damage your ship. Or if you get ejected, something happens where your ship gets damaged. But other than that, he also talked about the fact that if you don't navigate it well, that you could possibly break out of it into some other area of space. Now, the thing that I don't think anybody's ever thought about is, well, if I break out, for some reason, I come out of that wormhole mid-travel, where did I come out, right? Where am I now? And the question becomes, once you get there, if you were trying to travel several light years from one system to another, and you're somewhere in between, well, now there's no wormhole to jump back into, right? So now you've got to make your way back. At least I'm assuming if you broke out of the wormhole, it's not like there's another entrance right there. So the question for me becomes, well, now what do you do? You know, have you got to slow boat it? Do you have to figure out what system you're in? Obviously, you're going to be somewhere, or you're going to have to slow boat it back from someplace. There's a lot of questions there for that. Maybe you can jump back into the wormhole at that point. I don't know. Maybe there's a certain window that says that it's only going to be open for you to get back in, but they're going to have to figure that out. I like the idea of navigating in it. If you don't navigate it, you get kicked out. Or if you navigate it wrong, you start taking damage to your ship. Maybe you stay in it, but by the time you get out, man, your ship has got real significant damage to it. The other thing that they talked about in here that I think is interesting is he talked about recording it, which is something else a lot of people don't know. The idea, I think Gio talked about this a little while ago. He talked about the Carrack. The original Carrack had these antennas that came off of those side wings, right? And a lot of people didn't know that. They thought they were for communication, but they were there. Those are, if I'm not mistaken, if I'm remembering correctly, those antennas are there to help you navigate through wormholes as part of the exploration part of that ship. They retract, and currently on the Carrack, the location for them is on the ship. They're just retracted. But if you watch the Carrack commercial at the very end, you see the antennas come out like this just before it goes into a jump. Not into a wormhole, but just a jump. But anyway, that's what it's supposed to be there for. Your ships are supposed to be able to record. When you navigate through a wormhole, the idea is that your ship now has a recorder. There's a jump drive, which our ships don't have right now. We have quantum drives, but there's also a jump drive. That's another component that goes in your ship. And the jump drive will record you traveling through this wormhole. When you navigate through it, it records it. Then once it records it, the next time you want to go through that wormhole, you have that information already built into your ship. Now, whether it assists you or whether it becomes automated, maybe Chris talks about that later, but that's the purpose of why it's there. He also talks about the fact that now you can sell that. Once you've navigated through that wormhole, you can sell it to, he says, the government, but obviously it's for sale. Maybe you give it to people in your org so that now they can get through there easier, or you sell it to other people on the market or the black market, whatever the case may be. That's the idea of this recording of information. Sidebar, the Banu ships, in their jump drives, one of the things that makes them unique is that the Banu ships have a jump drive that continually records this information, stores it, and keeps it. And if you know the history or the lore of the Banu, their ships get passed down from one generation to the next, to the next, to the next. So their ships have accumulated information as traders, as universal traders. They've been over centuries, been traveling from here to here to here to here, and they have recorded all that information that is supposedly remains inside of their ships. So what makes their ships important and valuable is that when they traverse these wormholes, they no longer have to go through the hard work. They've got literally centuries of information stored as to traveling. Now, will the merchantmen and other ships that we get in the game have that? I know the merchantman is the ship that has that more than anything else. I don't know about their fighter ships, but I know the merchantman supposedly does it. Now, when we get our merchantman, will we have that advantage? Maybe. Who knows? Maybe that'll be a perk, right, to the alien tax, why those ships cost so much, because if you happen to have a merchantman, you actually can navigate through wormholes easier. Then again, maybe not. Maybe they'll make it from scratch. You got to get a hyperdrive recorder just like everybody else, and you got to build yours up like everybody else. Personally, I think it would be cool if you own a merchantman, that's a perk to that ship, just like I think that a perk for the 890 is that the sucker should float on water, right? So, but anyway, that gives you a little bit of history. but it's all hardwired in for them, right? So we'll see what happens. It's hardwired. The reason is it's hard to stop them from snaring. Okay, I didn't know that. Okay, but anyway, that's that. Let's move on past this whole thing about jump drives and explorations and wormholes and stuff.
KG, with a K, asks, I was wondering about the $5 million stretch goal. Tablet companion application. What tablet platform are you looking to support? iOS, Android, other? So we haven't really thought, I would think by default we would probably want to support both iOS and Android. And depending on the application, we may use something like Unity or something for the tablet side or something else. So not quite sure of that, but probably the likelihood is support of both iOS and Android. Okay, next.
Now, I am surprised that CIG has not done this. Some of you all will remember that back in the day, in fact, you could probably go on your store, your Android store, your Apple store, and look now. But there were several people who put out their own versions of apps for Star Citizen. Some of them gave statistics on different ships, different components. We know the people who had the My Radar app, they even implemented a thing showing the Stanton system, showing Crusader with all its moons. They put that in for a good little while. I'm really surprised CIG has not come up with a mobile app, at the very least, for Spectrum. At the very least, just to be able to go in there. They did have an app that allowed you to do your login for a while that was working. I don't think it works anymore. I think they've defaulted to using Google Authenticator now. But I'm really surprised after all this time that they haven't come up with an app people had on their phone that they could personally, would I use it? Heck yeah, because one time I ever look at Spectrum is when I get on the computer or something like that. But if I had like a dedicated app while I was sitting somewhere reading or waiting on my oil change, would I go to that app and read it? Absolutely, I would. I know you can go through your web browser, but I'm talking about without doing all that. I want something to just like click on it and I've got all my stuff there, information there. Could you get chat in there? That would be kind of cool, but there's no reason to chat with people in the game while I'm sitting at Jiffy Lube, right? But I would be able to access the star map, all that cool stuff on my phone. I think it would be great. I don't know why they haven't done that yet. They need to get on that.
Next question from Akodo. He asks, or she asks, in the early Wing Commander games, when we lost a wingman, there was a short funeral sequence. Will there be something similar when it happens during Squadron 42? Yes, absolutely there will be. I mean, that was one of the best parts of the original Wing Commander, and we sort of took it with Wing 2 and had it in Wing 3. I think we had it in Wing 4. So we'll definitely have the funeral sequence. We couldn't have a Squadron 42 without it. Okay.
Okay, if you guys played Wing Commander, you'll remember that. Going out on the deck, seeing all the guys out there with their guns, watching the casket float out into space. Will there be funerals in Squadron 42? Yes, that means that, it's kind of funny that Chris put that in the game, because basically that meant you're going to die, right? I can't tell you how many times I saw that funeral sequence. But they are going to do the thing with, funerals in Squadron 42.
Okay, on to the next question. Revan67 asks, will organizations upon discovering new systems be able to colonize planets, build stations, put up defenses? So that's a great question. That is actually something that we long-term want to do. Not so sure, you'll be able to do the fullest of that on initial release. Longer term is to do it fully, but shorter term, we certainly will have some mechanics in there that will allow planets themselves or outposts themselves to evolve during the game based on player action or what's happening in the universe, which I think will be really cool and will fold into sort of my goal of a living, breathing universe.
Okay, let me stop there for a second. I have such weird feelings about this because I hear people say this all the time. Will our org be able to take over a planet? My answer is no. Yeah, let me give you some reasons why. First of all, you guys have seen the planets in Star Citizen. Microtech, Hurston, not Crusader. We want to talk about Crusader. And our Corp. The scale and size alone, it says you can't take over a planet. Let's take it from planets. I don't even want to talk about planets. Let's go to moons. Even if you wanted to take over a moon, there's just no way to do it. There's just no way to do it. Now, can you build settlements and take over zones and areas? Absolutely. You definitely can. And obviously that would be great because it would create conflict, right? You could have people who are in the northern hemisphere or southern or eastern area or some area where they built and you've got other people on the other side. That's way better, way better than somebody saying, oh, I'm going to take over a whole freaking moon. Because what you'll do is you'll have conflict, you have ground conflict on the surface for territory, for space, right? Everybody's got to live. There may be some orgs that all decide to ally. I'm in test. Test may make some allegiances with some other orgs, maybe 10 other orgs. And part of that allegiance is that on this particular place where Test is, Test can't hold it all down, but these people we have agreements with, they can build on that same moon, and maybe they've got an area. So now there's 12 different orgs occupying that moon. And if any one of those orgs gets attacked, the other ones come and assist and help them. I mean, there's all types of cool things that way. But taking over a whole freaking moon, forget about it. It ain't happening. The logistics on it would be ridiculous. And I know people say, oh, it'd be so cool to be able to set up and make a base. Yeah, it's all dreams, okay? And I'm saying it. It's all dreams. It ain't happening, okay? But for gameplay's sake, to be able to do something like that would be much better, I think. Let's see, Alex. When the land plots came out, Jared said land plots would be sold and even cover half of Hurston. Yeah, I mean, half of Hurston. Yeah, okay. Yeah, you could do land plots. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that people can't occupy areas of it. Definitely. And that's why I'm saying I think that would be great because that'll be able to bring conflict for other people who want to be in those areas. Some people will be in prime areas, some people will be in deserted areas, whatever the case may be. My point is, ain't gonna be no taking over no planet or no moon. That is not going. The logistics on it are just not realistic. Okay, I mean, we're not the empire. It's not. I don't think it's going to happen. So anyway, let me keep going past that.
We're already looking at organizations, groups of players being able to sort of buy and build up some industry on various planets. So a certain aspect of that will be there, but to have like completely new planets that you're fully colonizing, doing all the rest of the stuff, that is definitely a goal. We are definitely working towards that. That is in the feature set we want to promise, but it probably won't be on the initial release just because it's got a lot of stuff to do with it. But again, that's along the lines of some of the procedural R&D that we're doing.
Okay, so there you go. You can colonize, you can build bases, you can do all that stuff. No problem. They said they want to do that. They got it. But, you know, this whole thing, again, of people saying I'm going to, I don't know if he talks about space stations. We'll see if he talks about space stations because I remember Eve used to be able to build stations. I don't think he touches on stations, though. I think he just talks about it from the planetary orbital side of it.
Okay, on to the next question. Alf at Justice asks, will there be short-range voice communication to hail other unknown vessels or call for help? Yes, absolutely, yeah. So you should be able to hail nearby vessels even if they're not on your friends list. And you should be able to put out a global sort of distress call, help me, I'm under attack, or that kind of thing. So I guess the answer would be yes in that.
We do have that.
Okay, next question. Big Damn Heroes asks, how is the one server setup going to work with servers being hosted in various parts of the globe? If I'm in a guild with someone from, say, Australia, how would we get grouped together if I'm playing on a US server and they're playing in the Australian hosted one? The thing to remember in our server setup is that we have one central server that is basically the general tasking server, but the actual servers that would handle the local, say, instance information when you're flying in space, you're dogfighting against someone, figuring out when you're on a planet what the other people are doing right next to you, they're actually mostly going to be distributed around the world. So that's where the local instance servers spin up. And what happens is the master server is really sort of the matchmaking server, and it's sort of going, okay, you and you, I'm putting you together in the same instance server, and it has a whole set of criteria when it does that matchmaking. So a large part of it is the friends list, so who's your friends, it's trying to match you with your friends, and also we'll do things like try and have, if you want to do PvP, put maybe some of your enemies in there, people of similar skill levels, and this is, by the way, just to stress, in the case that you're in an area that there are more people than can fit in any one instance, because if there's enough people just for one instance, everyone will be in the same instance, with a few exceptions, but like if someone's in a safe area and they don't want PvP and someone just wants PvP, then maybe there would be two instances, one for the PvP, one for out the PvP. But generally what happens is there's a whole sort of matchmaking criteria, and it's based on ping, friends list, associates, persons of interest, enemies, skill level, and it sort of uses those criteria to sort of match you up dynamically as you move around. Like as you fly around space, you go from area to area, it's matching you up and putting you in and out of different instances, and it's doing exactly the same down on the planet. And so what would happen if someone's in America and Australia, depending on what you tell the game, it probably would not opt to put you together if the ping was high, but you certainly can say, hey, you know what, I want to hang out with my friends no matter what, even if my ping's bad. And then in that case, the friend relationship would trump the ping in terms of the matchmaking criteria. So generally it would sort of default to trying to keep you into flying with people in low pings, but if you specifically say, no, I want to be with this person, it will make an exception for you. So I hope that answers your question, Big Damn Heroes. Okay, on to the...
Now, that's a tough one. I'm still trying to figure out this whole global means on how they're going to connect everybody without getting the lag. I know that I've talked to several people who into computing and all that other stuff, and there are some people who say it can be done. This is what everybody seems to say. Regionally, it can be done, no problem. Globally, there are hurdles. There are some people who've told me that there are, I'm not saying whether or not AWS, referring to Amazon, whether their system is capable of doing this. I know that there are some systems that are very, very fast, extremely fast. They're commercial, I don't know if they're military grade, whatever, but they're very, very fast at connecting on a global level. Is Amazon capable of that? If whatever system CIG uses for network capable of that. I'm not sure. I'm really curious to see how they're going to pull this off. For me, it's one thing, and I know it really impacts in the areas of FPS more than anything, probably. I'm really curious because when we start getting into larger ships that accommodate 24 people, 48 people, 80 people, and those people happen to be from all over the world. I mean, you've got people who are maybe playing in the UK with people who are playing in California in the United States, who's playing with somebody over in Italy. Will there, how do you minimize the impact of all those people playing the game at the same time? Thank you, Kai, for the follow. Thank you so much. I don't know how they're going to be able to pull that off. I'm just really curious. It's a technical hurdle, and it'll be something interesting to see if CIG does. I mean, that's what they're doing. They're tackling what has not been done before. And there's some people who say it can't be done. There's some people who say, yeah, in theory it can. Some people say the laws of physics are involved. So we'll have to see. We'll have to see what happens with that.
The 10th and last question. Funky Schnitzel asks, I'd like to know about landing on planets in the really large ships. We already know that ships will land on planets Freelancer style, but what about some of the truly huge player flyable ships such as destroyers or battlecruisers? Will these remain in orbit, crewed by our friends or AI crew, while we take a shuttle to the surface, or will owners of these ships have to be content only docking at space stations? Okay, well, that's a good question. We're definitely not going to let you fly the really big ships down onto the planet, so sort of probably destroyer on up will not be able to go down, although, don't know, maybe on the destroyer, but probably not. And kind of what you'll have to do is you'll either have to dock with a sort of local spaceport and then take a shuttle down to the planet, which we'll have those on some of the very bigger, sort of more, busy planets. So I could see it on Earth and Terra, or just take a shuttle down from your ships in orbit and you take a shuttle down. So I hope that answers that question. All right. Okay, so that's another episode of 10 for the Chairman. I hope the answers were interesting and informative for you. I'd like to thank everyone for their support and enthusiasm for the game. We couldn't be doing this without you. And I'll catch you next week. Goodbye.
All right. That was that one. We were going to squeeze one more in. I'm going to try to get this next one and this last one. Interesting about that particular episode of the last question about being able to go up and down from planets and whether big ships can land. And this was all prior to, and those of you who've been around for a while, you already know this. In the beginning, you were not supposed to be able to fly anywhere on a planet. You were going to basically go through a cinematic and land. And what they were saying was smaller ships would get in, no problem. But what about the big ones? Like the Idris. Idris is big, right? But we've seen that they have, once again, CIG's trying to do things that haven't been done before. And they've figured out a way to make it so that not only could we land anywhere on planets, but that even their large-scale ships like an Idris can go down into atmosphere and land on a planet. Other ships, like the Hull C, and mind you, when the Hull C's collapsed, it can land on a planet or a moon, right? No problem. It's only because the grids are out that it can't do that if you're carrying cargo. And so there's assumptions here for other ships like the Galaxy, ships like the Nautilus, ships that we know that aren't going to come down on planets, or like the Orion, and a fully let out Endeavor with all of its modules on it won't come down. The Banu Merchantman, as big as it is, it will land on planets. The Kraken, even bigger than an Idris, can land on planets. So again, this was January of last year, 2014. 9 years ago, that's where we were at. That was not going to happen. You're going to have to shuttle down. The shuttling down thing, though, it will be interesting still, because there will be instances, and I think there will be valid instances, where you will leave your ship at a station or leave it in orbit. What would be some reasons for that? There you go, Alex. You hit it on the head. Fuel consumption, right? The resources of what it will take to have some ships departing out of atmosphere. Gravitational elements could be a factor. Storms could be a factor. Risk could be a factor for why it will be better for you to keep your ship in space or at a dock versus going down an atmosphere. It's something to think about. Right now, for example, if you're taking a C2 down to move cargo, is it more important to use something else to move that cargo from, the planet's surface to a station and load up there? Of course, we know there are certain instances where you may not be able to land certain ships in certain areas for whatever those reasons may be. So anyway, I don't think it removes the gameplay aspect of using smaller ships to go back and forth from orbit down to a planet, but I am glad to know that there are instances where large ships, when there's a reason to do it, can go down without a problem. It's going to be very, very cool. Yeah, the SRV. We'll see if the SRV becomes involved in that. I know they talked about that being a reason to tow ships or to assist ships out of atmosphere. So we'll have to see, FC. All right, let's take in this final episode. This is episode 5 of 10 for the Chairman. By the way, thanks again for hanging out with me, guys. Appreciate you guys being here.
Hello everyone, welcome back to 10 for the Chairman. For those of you that haven't seen this show before, it's where I answer 10 questions that have been submitted by our generous subscribers who help fund all our community content, the video stuff that we're doing now, the Women's Hangar Show, Jump Point, and a bunch of other stuff that happens. And so I answered 10 questions for them about the game. Without further ado, let's get to it. So first question is from Funk Trooper. And Funk Trooper asks, hey Chris, if our first character plays through Squadron 42 and then later dies in the persistent universe, does the benefactor automatically have citizenship? Or would there be an option for that character to enlist and replay Squadron 42 if you would like to? So that's actually a pretty good question. I haven't really thought of that in terms of, if your, say, parent or relative has citizenship, do you get citizenship too in the case of your character dies and you move on? So I guess I would have to think about that. I would think that we would definitely give, if citizenship does not automatically transfer, which it may not do, we would definitely give you opportunities to regain citizenship. So military service would be one of them, or various other things that you could do. But I don't have a fully formed answer for you on that one, but that's why this process is great. You bring up issues that we need to resolve, and it's better to resolve them now than later. Okay, on to the...
Let me stop there. We just did our show this last Sunday on UEE, and we talked about civilian versus citizenship, and this is a good question, right? You're playing the game if you're in the persistent universe, and you've lost all your lives, right? Your regeneration's end, you can't come back, DNA thing is corrupted, whatever the case may be. When you come back into the game as your new character, will citizenship automatically be granted to you? And Chris says, you know what? That's a real good question. And it is a good question. I don't know. Boy, that definitely raises the risk factor of losing your character if it means that you got to go back and regain citizenship again. That's assuming that you claim citizenship in the first place. If you decided to be a civilian, you could care less. But if you've built up some type of rank within the UEE, and now you die, and now they tell you, well, you got to go back and regain it. I think that the out may be that they'll provide something else that you have to do other than playing Squadron all over again. Maybe there'll be some type of mission specific, because the rules for becoming a citizen say that you either have to serve in the military or do some form of contribution to the Empire. So maybe it's not a matter of going back and playing Squadron 42 as much as it is that you have to go and do something that lends itself credential, within the Empire. Now that could be missions, reputation. Maybe you just have to build up reputation, taking on certain type of UEE missions. I don't know. Maybe it's something working for the advocacy, but there's something that you can do that keeps you within the persistent universe. And then eventually you build up reputation again, and citizenship is quote unquote reinstated or, given to that family member. That might be an opportune way of doing it without someone having to go back and, oh God, I got to play Squadron 42 all over again and get ranked. Maybe that will be a way to do that. Okay, let's keep going here.
The next one, Subaki asks, Dear Chris, there's a rumor floating around general chat that once you fly a ship in the dogfighting module that you own, you can no longer melt that ship. Is that true? Or does it only apply once the package or ship is applied to a character in the persistent universe? So we haven't made a decision on that. Definitely once the game is live and the persistent universe is live and you take your ship and apply it to a persistent universe character, yes, you will not be able to melt it. You will not be able to trade it back in because you're playing the game and using the ship. My sort of initial response right now is on the dogfighting module, we'll probably give you a pass and let you fly around and have some fun and potentially melt your ship. But I'm not promising it just yet because I wouldn't want people to abuse that. But I think maybe it will be a sort of opportunity for people to try out things that they like. And decide what they really want to play with. But definitely once persistent universe happens, yeah, once you apply your package to a real in-game character and the in-game character you enter the world, then you won't be able to just sort of arbitrarily melt it and change it around.
I don't completely remember all of this back in the day. I do remember there was something weird about your ship and applying it to your character. I know one of the ways that CIG got around this was, as I mentioned earlier, with Rec, when you got the points that allowed you to rent other ships. So, whatever ship, like let's say you bought a Hornet and that was the only ship you had. Well, when you got Rec, you could also rent other ships. So if you want to fly an Avenger, you could do that. And the Arena Commander or the dogfighting module, not only was it about dogfighting, but it was also your way to test out other ships, so that you could see whether there was something else you were interested in. And obviously, once you came out of the module after you get to using the Rec, if you liked it, it kind of gave you the incentive to actually go out and maybe buy that ship next so you had it in your fleet. But I don't remember this whole thing about losing your ship. Or, I do remember there was something weird about when you finally picked the ship to be with you, it stayed with you permanently. It's all vague, guys. We're talking 10 years freaking ago. Vague 9 years ago. I don't remember.
Okay, next question comes from Totenkopf. There you go. Totenkopf asks, how will contracts work between organizations and individuals? Will there be a system in place within the game or organization module that will allow organizations or individuals to negotiate contracts, ensure cargo or assets involved, and finalize payout? So we'll definitely have a system to be able to handle these kind of things. We may even have a system where you could put money in escrow until a job is performed. Maybe even someone administers that for a fee. And also we're going to have a rating system. I think I've mentioned this before, but in America there's this service called Uber where you can dial up and sort of hire cars to take you places. and both the person that hires the car and the driver of the car rate the other person. So when you're looking at a car nearby, you can see what that driver's rating is, and the driver can also see what your rating is. So you obviously don't want to go with someone that only has a 1-star rating. You want to go with someone that has a 4 or 5-star rating. And I think that in that case, we would definitely have both parties in sort of contract. When you hire someone, like an employer hires someone to run a mission, both the employer and the person running the mission can rate each other, and so you can sort of see, okay, well, this is a transport pilot, and he's got a 4.5-star rating out of 5. He's pretty good. He's definitely worth me paying a premium. And then this guy's got a 3-star rating over here. So we'll have a bit of that. So we'll have a bit of that sort of self-regulating objective ratings, and then also maybe some systems like escrow and a role that someone can take as an arbitrator for a fee. To arbitrate sort of disputes. So I think we'll have systems that are fairly similar to what's in the real world to make that kind of stuff work well.
Okay, so a little bit of this is in there right now, right? We do have contracts. For example, we have like the medical things, right? Where someone, or a transport mission, someone needs to get from here to there. The rating system's not completely there yet. We haven't gotten to this point where we're rating each other. Whether this person was safe, whether they were good, whether they ripped me off, whether they killed me. We don't have any of that in there. I do hope that they will do that, that they'll put something in like that, and maybe it just could be a code. When you rate somebody, give them a star, and then after that, if you give them a negative, if it's a negative rating, then you have to say why, right? And it could just be a one-word answer, KOS, killed on sight. They killed me on sight. Whatever, but I think that would be kind of cool for people to be able to judge whether or not they want to be able to hire somebody or do a contract or a deal with somebody. The org side of this, org 2.0, which we've been waiting on forever. Org 2.0 involves a lot of different things, from matchmaking all the way through setting up relationships between orgs and all of this stuff. Has not happened yet. That still has not happened. And, to be honest with you, if it was implemented at this point in the game, would it mean anything? I don't know, because orgs don't need org 2.0 to communicate. Yeah, it'd be great if it was in game, but I think it would almost have dust on it, because people just wouldn't be, I don't know that orgs would be using it to the fullest extent right now. They may be using certain aspects of it, but for now, I don't think it's there.
Okay, so next question comes from Valarian, who asks, will you be able to hail NPC ships and threaten them to drop their cargo on the off chance it will save their ship? If so, will there be a randomly generated personality for NPCs, some that fight, flee to the nearest authority, or cows that will drop their cargo and run? Yeah, the short answer is yes, absolutely. I mean, my goal actually is for the NPCs in the game to sort of feel and appear much like real people. So in some ways, I almost sort of feel like until you get up close, I kind of don't want the players to really even know that it's an NPC or a player. It could be an NPC or it could be a player, and therefore the NPCs are already designing a bunch of behavior for them, and part of their plan is to sort of have sort of kind of human-like responses, like preserve their own life or do all that kind of stuff. So I would definitely say that you will be able to say give us your cargo, or pay the consequences. And some people will fight you, and some people will just surrender the cargo and get out of there. Okay, so
interesting. We know that Tony Z talked about this, that the NPCs will have basically their own personality. Some will be more aggressive, some more passive, some will flee, some will fight. So that we already know. We know they're going to demonstrate that as far as the NPCs go. I'm curious about how you're going to implement this with ships, though. If I run into a ship, an NPC ship, and I want to pirate it, how do I challenge them? It's not like some other games, like a Bethesda game, where you're going to get a click bar of selections at the bottom saying challenge, don't challenge. It doesn't happen in this game. So our communication in this game is voice-based. Will CIG create a chat AI, some form of AI that, certain keywords that you say, AI detects, right? Stop your ship, for example. Stop your ship. Will that type of verbal thing, because right now, we have in-game communication. If I say that, will the AI detect what I said and proceed to either stop or proceed to flee or proceed to attack? There could be elements of that they could create. We know the technology exists. We're not doing it right now, but we know it exists. So the question becomes, how do we interact with NPCs, since there is no bar with text that you're going to click on to initiate? You may say there's the inner thought system. Nah, that's going to break immersion. I don't think that the inner thought system is going to be used to interact with someone who's in a different ship, because we do know now you can hail other ships, you can connect with other players and talk to them directly. I don't see why they would break that form of communication, even when it comes to NPCs. So yeah, we'll see what happens with that, where they go with it.
Next question comes from Hollow-san Voidrax, who asks, will all ships have artificial gravity? If so, how does that affect the G-force system you spoke about for the dogfighting? So not all ships will have artificial gravity. Most of the bigger ones where you walk around probably will have artificial gravity. I'm sort of playing with the idea that maybe on some ones you would just have sort of like kind of more magnetic boots, because we are actually modeling for our first-person combat artificial gravity and zero-G combat. So we're going to have all those as options, and one of the things that potentially could be something that would be fun to disrupt borders would be to basically disable your artificial gravity, and then all of a sudden you're in zero-G. How it affects the G-force system? Well, I mean, really not so much. I mean, pilots fly around here in Earth and they're experiencing the gravity of Earth, yet they still deal with G's as they pull tight turns. And the same would definitely be true in space. If you have artificial gravity in your ship and you start to really sort of, pull a really hard right turn, you will, since you're not statically bound to the object that's turning right, there'll be an equal and opposite force on you and you'll be getting pushed. So you'll probably still have some level, I mean, you'll still have obviously G-forces happening even when there's artificial gravity. But generally the other thing to, I think, remember is sort of the bigger ships that you would more likely have the artificial gravity. Like, so for instance, the Hornet doesn't really have artificial gravity because you're strapped in. But the bigger ships, you probably won't be able to pull as hard of maneuvers as you would necessarily in, say, some of the smaller ships, which is, again, part of the sort of trade-off balance between big ships, small ships. Big ships have more armor, more weapons, but then again, they can't move it quite as quickly and all the rest of the stuff. So, so I hope that answers the question.
Okay, so G-forces. We know CIG a few years ago implemented this into the game. You guys have been on ships before where you move, someone pulls the ship a little bit too hard, so left, right, or up or down, whatever the case may be, on its axis, and your body moves. You shift left or right. If it's done abruptly or too quickly, you fall, right? You get thrown down, forward or backward. You take injury. All that stuff is in the game. Right now, though, what we don't have in the game is being able to turn off gravity. There is one time where it does happen, though, and that is if you get a soft death. I got pirated. You guys heard me say this a little while ago. I got pirated a few weeks ago, and I had never experienced soft death. I was in space at the time, and I was totally surprised that when I saw my systems go down, and I realized that I had been, I knew I was being pirated. But once my systems went down, I said, okay, my ship's dead. I'm dead in the water. I know they're coming after me. And so I got out of the chair, in the cockpit, and I started floating. I didn't expect that. It was the coolest thing in the world. I was expecting to have to run through the ship and blah, but it was so cool that when my systems went down, so did the gravity in my ship, which means that at least we do know that is working in the ships. They just haven't implemented a control where I could turn gravity on and off. But when I went soft death, I was literally EVAing through my ship. I was in a C2, and it was the weirdest thing to EVA through a C2 because you're floating and, you got to wait for the doors to open and you're bouncing around. But it was very, very cool. So we do know that they are getting the game closer and closer to that.
So the next question comes from Zig, who asks, will we ever be able to play as the other alien races? If so, will we have an expansion pack of a sort similar to Squadron 42, but with an alien storyline? So you'll definitely down the road be able to play as one of the other alien races. That will be a sort of longer term expansion of the persistent universe. Just right now, in terms of generating content and assets, it's, we've already got like crazy amount of stuff to do. I mean, I
want to stop them there for a second. You notice he said you'll be able to do it in the persistent universe, not in Squadron 42. That was something he said maybe down the line. And that, to Kai's point, we're talking, whenever that may be. I wouldn't even count on that. It's interesting that people do want to play as other alien races, but it's not going to happen anytime soon.
It's we've already got like crazy amount of stuff to do. I mean, there's a whole bunch of people out there that think we've almost got too much to do already. So that won't be at the beginning, but that is definitely a long-term plan because I really want to see that, and I think it'd be fun to play as a Tavarian or as a Jan or a Banu. And if we do that, we probably would also create sort of a companion single-player experience like Squadron 42, but for the race. Okay, so I think, yes, we will have that.
My question to you is this: if you play as other alien races, in other games when you do that, you're able to do it because for some reason or other, there is the lore doesn't break, right? Tavarans are part of the UEE. Could I be a Xi'an and be in the UEE? Can I be Vanduul? Unless you want to do like Star Trek, where Worf was a Klingon and he was one of the Klingons that became a part of Starfleet. I wonder about that in the sense of the lore, about whether or not I want to see people from other races existing within that space. I'm just not sure. And if they are, then the most they could be is probably civilian. I don't know about that. I got to figure that out. That's a good one. Yeah, Ferengi. Yeah. And again, that was in the Star Trek universe, but Star Trek was about bringing other people in, right? That was their thing. There weren't any Romulans walking around. You know what I mean? So later on there is, but that's later. I don't know. I'm just kind of curious about that. I'm wondering if you're Vanduul, can you be in the UEE? See, everything about Vanduul, their nature would say no. That's the other problem. Everything about them, Worf, even though he was Klingon, he was raised by human parents. I don't know. I'm wrestling with that one. I don't know. We'll have to see.
Next question comes from Phoenix9151, who asks, will the next great starship be available as a pledge ship? I can't wait to see what some of these teams come up with and maybe even buy it if I like it. If the ship fits, fly it. So definitely the next great starship ship will be available to everyone out there and be available in the persistent universe. So
let me stop there for a second. I'll come back to this. Yeah, Alex, I agree. You don't have to be in the UEE. But my question is, are you bound to the lore? In other words, you can't be in the UEE. I'm talking about UEE space. I don't mean just necessarily just being a part of the UEE. I'm saying, can a Vanduul live in Terra? Let me put it to you that way. Can a Vanduul live in Terra? And maybe, I don't know. I'm just asking. Would a Vanduul want to live in Terra if you're playing as a character? If you're just worrying about the cosmetics and the appearance of the character, well, okay, I guess if that's what you're worried about. I'm looking at it from a role play lore aspect. Would it break it by having a Vanduul living in some penthouse in Terra? I don't know. It ain't sitting right with me, I don't know. I might be one of those people telling them that, you need to, put up a wall. Build a wall. Anyway, let me go back to this question because I got all sidetracked. Next great starship.
Teams come up with and maybe even buy it if I like it. If the ship fits, fly it. So definitely the next great starship ship will be available to everyone out there and be available in the persistent universe. So so yes, the answer is yes.
Yes.
And I think
we're sort of
debating,
like
but we're probably going to let you guys sort of choose what kind of ship it's going to be. So that'll be kind of fun for you. Okay, next question comes from Commander Pika P, who says, may we disable our weapon systems in order to meet the energy requirements of a high-capacity shield? In turn, if shields go down, can we forward power back to the weapon systems on the fly? So yes, the answer is absolutely yes on that. That's part of the core design.
It's in the game.
You're able to do a huge amount of energy management, diverting energy from your power plant to your engine thrusters, to your shield, to your weapons, and even inside your shield, you'll maybe be able to, depending on the shield setup you have, you'll probably be able to divert power between the different segments of the shield as well, and even between the different weapons. So, so yes, is the answer there. So the next question comes from Justicus, who says, will we be able to buy parts of ships as well, so that we can build our own ships from them? Specifically the non-human ships that we can't buy from a storefront and have had no luck capturing in the wild. That's an interesting question. I mean, so really the way the ships work is that you sort of buy a hull and then you can customize it, add different items, equipment to it. But we're not really right now set up to sort of buy, I don't know, like a rear wing and then a fender from a different ship and put them all together and sort of make some hybrid ship. So I'm not sure if we'll be able to build ships from parts. Not at the beginning. We definitely won't be able to build ships from parts. Who knows down the road? But you certainly will be able to sort of buy different equipment and items and add them to your ship, and some potentially could be an alien item that you could have to have adapted to work on your ship. So maybe sort of a small combination of this, but not to the extent that you can build a ship wholly out of just sort of junk parts. Okay, last question.
Let me ask you guys, how do you feel about that? I'm not into this idea of ship building. Ship modification is cool. I am looking forward to Starfield. And I know there's some assembly, there where you can take modules. It's modular building, but this person's talking about like building ships. And I don't know, that's lore breaking for me. I don't know. In the real world, people don't go out and build cars necessarily. You just buy cars and modify them and change them. I mean, yeah, I know there are some people out there who build cars. Don't get me wrong, guys, customs and stuff. But I'm just saying it's not a common practice. I like the idea of modifications, being able to add things to ships to make them unique doesn't bother me. But do I want to see somebody making a ship just out of scratch in the universe? But first of all, the technical feat behind that is going to be ridiculous for the developers. This is something I think would be wasted time. I think the fact that we have a variety of ships and different ships, and as long as we can customize them and make them unique, make them feel like this is mine, it's different from everybody else's, that would satisfy me more than saying, oh, I actually want to, get out the blowtorch and welding and start doing my own ship. For me, that's a bit too much, but I don't know. That's me. Yeah, I'm not edgy enough. Yeah, okay.
Comes from Arbitrary Sketch, who asks, what kind of interactions can players have with non-hostile NPC ships? Can we request repair, refuel, and resupply assistance from a passing carrier? Trade goods with merchant ships, things of that nature. So yes, answer is absolutely yes. Those are all things that we want to do. As I said a little earlier in this section, that one of my goals is to make the NPC behavior be pretty human-like, and they behave and do the same jobs and same actions that most players will do. So, and also obscure the fact that it is an NPC from a real player, at least from a distance, from people. So it just feels like it's a living, breathing world that's populated. And you'll run into people, and hey, some may be AI controlled and some may be player controlled. And if we do our job right, maybe you won't even realize that a player is playing a ship and you think it's an AI, and vice versa. But they'll definitely be able to. They'll help you out. They'll refuel you. They'll do all those kind of things. Are all sort of things that we're planning for. Okay, I hope that answered the question.
Okay, so, interesting there. Let me let him finish talking. I'll let Chris finish.
That concludes another episode of 10 for the Chairman. Again, thank all of you for backing and supporting the game and the contribution of all the subscribers, because it helps us do these community communication, information like this, and Wingman's Hangar, and the Jump Point magazine, and quite a few more of the things we have planned. And anyway, thank all of you, and I'll talk to you next week. Bye.
Okay, so that was that one. The NPCs at the end, and we did talk about this earlier. We know that Tony Z has talked about the NPC interactions before. Obviously there's some dynamics of, again, how do we communicate with them? That's my big question, without breaking the immersion, breaking the standards, or the way CIG has created communication. They've definitely created communication to be verbal, by voice. Everything in the game is done that way right now, except for the inner thought aspects, and it's inner thought, not outer thought. So if I see a refueling ship and I hail it, I hit the T button or whatever button it is to hail, and the ship responds, and the captain's picture pops up on my screen on my MFD. The question is, do you want fuel, or are you able to, can you refuel me? And it's funny because CIG has always said this. They want the game to get to a point where you can't distinguish between NPCs and players. And I love that idea. I think it's going to be interesting to do. I've had it happen a couple times where I wasn't sure whether it was an NPC or player that was trying to interdict me before. I thought that was a very cool feeling when that happened. But when it comes down to interacting with these different ships, like I said, a refueling ship, if it pops up on my MFD, is there going to be something there maybe that I can click on that gives me options like refuel, restock, reload? Or is it going to be something that there's an AI that actually understands what I say, and I say something, refuel, need refueling, and it actually detects that phrase. It gets it and puts it up there. That would be very cool too. Maybe that will be something that they will do. We know that we've seen it happening already with NVIDIA, with chat AI or chat, you know what I'm talking about. All that stuff that's happening right now. Bard with Google, Chat GPT. Thank you. I couldn't think of what I was trying to say. But we'll see whether or not they come up with some form of interaction that works well with doing something like that. I think they can do it. I'm just curious to see how it goes. Let's see what folks have got to say here. This is from Kaizen. I'd really like to see your thoughts on this issue, Griff. These 10 for chairmans were obviously great. Why do you think they stopped? Do you think they were some tension between CI having to cash the checks and CI run speed? I look at the 10 for chairmans as being a thing of their time. Now, don't get me wrong. I think that when he started doing letter from the chairman, that should have been the transition, right? Because answering questions from players about stuff is all speculative, for lack of a better way of putting it. Chris can say, this is what we'd like to do, right? And then the question becomes, did they deliver? And unfortunately, saying what we'd like to do versus what we're going to do gets to be hairy, because the backers and the players, they hear something that excites them and they move to, this is what CIG said they're going to do. Not that Chris was saying, this is something that we'd like to do. When we opened up the show, one of the first things we talked about was that it's taken them 10 years to 3.2. Oh God, I forgot what the very first question was, but I said that they're just now, multi-crewing ships in the Arena Commander. He said that back in 2013, that they wanted to make it so that we'll be able to get in the Connie and multi-crew and do multi-crew battles. It took 10 years, right? And in that video, when he said it in episode 3, he said, well, we hope to get that within the next year, which would have been 2014. And so, it's not that it's not in his vision or capable, but that time frame thing, he himself said 1 year, and it's taken 10 years for the tech and everything to get to a place where he can do that now. So I think that, yeah, you're right. I think, don't write a check that your butt can't cash, right? I think he has to be careful about what he says. And even when he's done the letter for the chairman, like that annual letter thing, that's bitten him in the butt too, for him saying this is what we want to have by the end of the year or before the beginning of next year or the third quarter. It's tough because players do want a schedule. They do want something that tells them, to meet some form of expectation of when to look for something, because they're investing money, they're investing time, they're being committed to the game. And there's the consumer side of it. I paid for it. It's not privilege. It's just the fact that I'm a consumer. I paid for something. I want something in return. So that's understandable. That we've talked about this, right? That tightrope of being able to satisfy transparency mixed with vision based on what's practical in development. And some people in the community can swallow it. Some people in the community, it's difficult, so I think that's one of the reasons why. But I think that there should be annuals. I've always said that I wish they did pillar talks once or twice a year, where those leads, Sean Tracy and Brian Chambers and all the people there, I wish there was that time where they at round table where the 5 of them are sitting around the table. It used to be Paul Jones, but John Crew, they sit around the table and talk about, here's where we are. This is what we're doing. This is what we can expect to accomplish. I like that better because they're much more the hands-on people that know what the departments are doing and exactly where they are, versus Chris, Chris doesn't know, but Chris is the visionary and he could put out there what we'd like to do, where the guys that are at the table, those guys who do the pillar talks, are the people who talk about this is what we are doing and what we know we can do and what we're working on. And I wish they did that more often. You'll probably need to see what else. Doing 5 shows a week. Yeah, that's tough. Too many people were taking what Chris said for, yep, that's what Fast Card said as gospel. This is why we can't have nice things. Based on that, when do you think Star Citizen will release? Boy, that's a good one. I think this is always a tough question to ask about the persistent universe. You guys have heard my predictions about Squadron. I think Squadron's going to get an announcement this fall. And when I say announcement, I'm talking about 2024, fourth quarter 2024, something like that. That's what I think they'll do. Whether they'll show us something or not, I think they're going to show us definitely either one of two. Either they're going to show us in-depth Pyro, like Pyro finished, like just tweaks that they need to do, or we'll see something for Star Citizen, for Squadron 42. Somebody gave a really good suggestion the other day, which was like an update of the last vertical slice. It didn't have to be something new, but just showing us where they were. But I think that they're going to show us something. So that's my thing for that. But for the persistent universe, which continually is just always going to be a development thing, it's always going to grow. It's going to be no different than what's happening with Starfield. People are saying, oh, Starfield said they're only going to put 10% of their worlds are going to be. Yeah, that's because they're building it so they can expand it out later. It's not going to stop there between the mod people and them adding more stuff with each one of their chapters. Eventually that universe may be 50% occupied. They're giving themselves room because to do all that crafting and everything it would delay their game even longer. It took them 8 years. And Todd said, once I got into this thing, halfway through it, I realized why people don't make games like this because of the amount of work it takes. So he says it takes a long time to do what Star Citizen is trying to do, and even what they're trying to do. So I think okay, and I could be wrong. I don't want to belabor this point. I believe that when Vulkan is in, server meshing is in, and when it moves from static to dynamic, and when the PES, when the persistence entity streaming is locked down, we're going to see everything accelerate. And that acceleration is only going to be based upon things coming in like NPC ships flying around. Because we used to have them back in the day. Some of you guys remember, we used to have NPC ships flying around in the game. They took them out. But NPC ships will be flying around. Systems will start coming online very quickly, very quickly. They got a lot of people who've been working on that stuff for a while. So worlds and systems will start coming in, landing zones. Enemy interactions will start coming up because I think the AI is another factor. We know that's another factor that has to happen, taking the load off with that. So to me, those three elements have got to be in place for things. Oh, and the other thing is that we've got to get the server numbers up, which is also tied to those other things I mentioned too. So you've got to have more people in the universe. So to create 2 or 3 or 4 systems and you still only have 250 people, you're never running anybody. You have to have, even if you'll have nothing but NPCs mostly. That's what you'll have mostly. So I think that all that has to fall into place. And at that point, the game is playable and people will come to it and enjoy it. Stability is there. The promise of worlds will come in. I think that if you have, to me, I could be wrong, gang. If there are 5 systems in the game, that's a huge universe. 5 systems. Pyro's 2.5 times the Stanton. Nyx is 5 times the size of Stanton. That's a lot of space just for those 3. If you add 2 more on top of that, as far as I'm concerned, it's a big game. It's big at that point. At that point, you need to be having over 1,000 players in the game. Over 1,000. At least over 1,000 people in the game with the system being that big. And they've got to make that happen. So those are some of the factors I think they're going to need. Yeah, Starfield. Alex, I'm always concerned about that number because I used to say that too. And I do know that they said that they had it in their minds 25 years ago. But I know that the physical development of the game started in 2015. I think it was 2015. It was 8 years ago. I mean, when they actually were nose at the grindstone working on it, because they were doing, and there's different teams over at Bethesda, right? But I know that they've been working on it for over 10 years. It started really getting worked on 8 years ago. That's what Todd said. So I don't know. We'll see. Let's see. Board Game had an interview with some ex-devs, and they said that they've been waiting on releasing a bunch of stuff. Yes, that's true. Yeah, that's like saying that the game he dreamed of as a kid 50 years ago. Yeah. Yeah, you too about that number. Yeah, as well. Yeah. I see the PU needs 30 systems to release in 2030. Question is how they can do per year. No, oh Admiral, there's no way they're going to put out systems per year. There's no way. And let me tell you why I say that. I'm talking about systems now. They fully fleshed out may be a different thing. But if you remember, about 4 years ago, they developed in their technology with their software that they were able to make planets that used to take them 2 years. They were able to do it within 2 to 3 months. And so I'm seeing CIG getting to a place where they're dropping 3 and 4 systems a year. That's where I'm seeing them. There's no way they're going to be doing 1 system per year. Now, what's in those systems may be another story. But again, think about a lot of this stuff will be mission based and based upon quantum. And so even if there aren't quote unquote, I remember a lot of the spaces don't have a lot of landing zones. You know what I'm saying? You know, Stanton's unique because of the 4 corporations that are there, but that's not every system. So you may go into some systems where there's only maybe 2 or 3 landing zones in them, maybe just 2, maybe 1 even. But then there's going to be the base building aspect of it where players are doing things. So the need for the build out, like what we have in Stanton is huge in the sense of how much, you know, handcrafted stuff that they've done versus these other systems where all that handcrafting is not necessarily going to be needed. And again, they've been working on systems. I don't know why people think that they've only been working on Pyro and maybe Nyx. That'd be foolhardy for 10 years. Oh my God. No, they've worked on multiple systems before. We've seen other stuff. We've seen concept art for other places, and I'm sure that they've started working on those. How far along they are may be the question, how detailed they are. But I guarantee you, there's no way we're going to be waiting 2030 to get all the systems in the game. It was on one of their trailers. Yeah, last 2 years. Griff, that's what I meant. Oh, even with 5 per year, 5 systems per year, that's 6 years. Okay, I got you now. Okay, yeah, 6 years from now. Yeah, okay. I'm sorry. I thought you were saying 20. I read wrong, Admiral. My apologies. Publicly apologizing. I thought you were saying it was going to take them 30 years. You meant by 2030, whether they could get stuff in. I got you. Yes, we're on the same page, Admiral. Okay, yeah. I'm just reading wrong, Admiral. Sorry, that was me and my dyslexia kicking in, I guess. Yeah, I got you. Yeah, 6 years from now. Okay. Yeah, but again, I think that if they have 5 systems in, people will feel really comfortable. There's a lot of place to explore, and then they can continue to expand, right? As exploration expands, we expand the game. Eve. Yeah, Eve did do that. Eve started adding more stuff as time went by. You know what I mean? So I think that's what CIG is going to do. Anyway, I am done. I am over time. Thank you guys for joining me. As I mentioned before, I'm doing my best to start streaming on Tuesdays and Thursdays, midday around 12 noon. I got a half-hour late start today because one of my lights went out. More money. Had technical issues with that. And I finally decided to figure out another way to light myself. So that's why I'm here doing this. But I do want to say thank you guys for joining me for these 10 for the chairman. I'm going to do this again every Tuesday. So I'll be doing 2 or 3 episodes next Tuesday. It'll be 3 episodes at least because these are only about 15 minutes long. I'll do 3 episodes next week. And then on Thursdays, Thursdays, I do basically a review of what's going on in the Star Citizen. I do therapy Thursdays. We didn't get to do it last week, but we will this week because I don't have to do a lot of reading this week. So tell people if they want to talk about Star Citizen, like what bugs them about the game. We're going to have therapy Thursday where they can come in and talk about that. So that'll be this Thursday. And hopefully you guys will be able to join me for that. Okay. Thanks again, everybody, for coming and hanging out with me. I hope you guys have a great Tuesday, great week. Hopefully I'll see you guys on Thursday. And as we say at Soul Citizens, peace, love, and soul. Take it easy.